Well, good morning, everyone, and welcome to our Startup Inventor Showcase monthly speaker series. We're very pleased to welcome you to this, I guess, our third installment in this series. I'm Scott Osborne. I'm Vice President of the Corporate Engagement Office, where we do corporate business development, economic engagement. We support the entrepreneurial and startup community through our Keenan Center for Entrepreneurship, and we do technology commercialization on behalf of the university. So this morning, we're here for a very special session. In just a few moments, our speakers for the day will be introduced, but I wanted to welcome you and thank you all for coming online. The Ohio State University and the Wexner Medical Center are indeed open for business. So we are learning this week to do things in a different way than we have in weeks past, but we are fully functioning, and we're excited about the opportunity, frankly, to be able to do things, to rise to the challenges that we're all facing and support one another and make sure that all the things that we do every day continue to get done, albeit in a different manner. So I want to mention that I think you should stay tuned for some opportunities. This challenge that we find ourselves faced with is going to give us an opportunity to look at innovation in a new way. So I think in the days and weeks ahead, you're going to hear some things coming out of Ohio State, offering challenges and opportunities for you to bring innovative solutions to the social crisis that we're dealing with right now. But to move forward with our program, this series is designed to help you, inventors and would-be inventors, to understand a little better the pathway for taking your ideas into the marketplace to have the impact on the world around us that we know that you all desire to have. This series is designed to give you a glimpse at the resources and tools that are available, and perhaps most importantly, the experiences of those who have gone before and walked this journey. So as you hear our speakers today, and you hear our speakers in the future, you'll be hearing both the ups and downs of that commercialization cycle. But their journeys are very exciting, and we're very pleased that these folks have so willingly participated in this program to share their journeys with you. So now, I want to thank you for joining us, and now I'm going to introduce Dr. Rebecca Jackson, who's the director of the Center for Clinical and Translational Sciences, or as we think of her, the Wonder Woman of Science. Dr. Jackson, please.
You have a slide?
That's what I'm pulling. Choose that mic.
Well, while we're waiting for him to get the slides up, good morning. And thank you all so much for attending. I'm going to actually come here in front because I'm too short to sit in the back. But I'm going to talk to you just a smidge about kind of our goals for today, our goals for this series, and some of the take-home messages specifically that we want you to focus on today. As we've talked about in each of these sessions, the journey to translation can take many different pathways. And traditionally, when we think about translational science, we think about moving from discovery or bench science to the clinical realm, from the clinical realm to population, and then population to actually adoption with public policy or other types of things. But in fact, this is a multi-directional process. And so we can learn from the community. Certainly we're learning that. If you think about it in COVID-19, bring it back to the laboratory and to the bedside, and then move new inventions for example, vaccines, new treatments out to the individuals. But it's important to recognize, in fact, that there are many ways to translation. And so traditionally, as we think about it from an academic perspective, we often put translation in terms of the publications, the presentations, and the other things that we move forward to actually move science, to change that needle, and to be able to do that. Copyright is another form of translation where we actually copyright our materials, we bring them out broadly and allow others to adopt the educational materials or other things that we move forward. But I'd suggest that a third pathway that we should consider as academicians and scientists is that which actually moves along entrepreneurship and commercialization. How do we get some of the best diagnostics, treatments, and preventive strategies in the hands of individuals? How do we actually get that uptake? And in fact, we need to do that in terms of public-private partnerships and moving our science forward. We've all learned about the innovation cycle for years, and certainly people have talked about the importance of doing that. But if you look carefully at the innovation cycle, you'll realize that it actually looks like our typical scientific discovery cycle as well, right? That we actually define a need, that we move forward the science, that we continue to refine it, and we begin to go through a series of experiments to move forward. And ultimately, we disseminate that to other scientists who uptake our ideas and take them to the next level to move the entire field forward. So as a scientist, I would ask you to actually challenge yourself to think about this as a balance, right? How do we continue to move? Because this is not an either or. This, in fact, could be something that you do both. So how might you continue to move forward your science through abstracts, through presentations, through publications, through actually the adoption and guidelines that change the way that we practice medicine? And balance that to think about, are there other aspects that could actually be taken up because we engage in commercialization and entrepreneurship? So what about invention disclosures, the development of IP, moving forward to patenting, licensing, or actually partnering with venture capitalists or business in order to move our new ideas forward? And one of the goals of our program over the next several months, and in fact next year, will be to help you to think about these pathways that you might take to be able not to give up your science, but to continue to move forward your science. At the same time, you're looking to see if there's actually commercialization benefit associated with that. One of the things that we're going to focus on today, and you'll certainly hear from some of our speakers, is that unfortunately there is a huge gender gap. This has been noticed for more than probably 50 or 60 years. It persists. It's a little bit better, but it's clearly not where we want it to be today. And so how do we actually develop the types of programs that empower women, men, our students, our scholars, to move forward and to think about ways to consider integrating or actually adopting entrepreneurship in their day-to-day activities. And I suggest that there are several things that are ongoing at the university that have been suggested that are things that will actually facilitate going down a pathway of entrepreneurship, not only for women, but in fact for men and women. So the first of those is to improve the institutional conditions. So how do we actually create an environment that actually rewards innovation and entrepreneurship at the same level that we reward scientific dissemination moving forward? And I think there are a number of new programs and ideas that are working on that and trying to be able to consider effective ways of moving forward those strategies. The second is to increase access to institutional entrepreneurship skills program. And this workshop series, along with other programs that are given across the university, can actually give you the basic skills to start to be able to think Does this have value? How do I capture that value? How do I move it forward in a business sense at moving things forward? And you'll hear more today from Mary Uhas and others about opportunities to be able to do that, to start to shrink the gender gap. The third is increasing the funding to support both women's and men's effort. And you will be hearing over the course of the next several months a new program at the Center for Clinical and Translational Science that we're doing together in collaboration with the Office of Corporate Engagement and Technology Commercialization to be able to actually facilitate moving things forward along that pathway to success. And then lastly, and importantly, what we hope this workshop series does, and a series of additional workshops, is to start to help you to maybe become a little bit more aware. Where might you have some value in your work over and above its scientific potential? Is there actually commercialization potential that's available here? How are you going to have the greatest impact in the largest numbers of people in the shortest period of time? Because ultimately, that's what we care about in translational science, is taking today's discoveries to improve human health in the coming years. I always finish with my favorite quote, which is Henry Ford's, which is to remember that, in fact, it takes a team, it takes an entire community to actually move things forward. And as he said, coming together is a beginning. Hopefully this convening of us to be able to talk about and have these discussions around inventions and commercialization is that first step. Keeping together is progress. So building a community that actually can continue to sustain activity widely across the university, across multiple departments and colleges, that can bring the strengths of all of Ohio State to be able to ultimately impact human health. And then working together, and I would say both through science and through entrepreneurship and inventorship, is ultimately success. Thank you so much for attending our virtual conference today. We look forward to seeing you again either later in the spring face-to-face or in the fall semester. And I'd like to turn the podium over now to Dr. Melissa Bailey. Melissa is a professor in the College of Optometry. She was a KL2 trainee or scholar within the Center for Clinical and Translational Science. I think if there's probably two words that I can use to capture Melissa, it is committed and innovative, because certainly Melissa thinks big and has thought about what can I do to ultimately make a difference in individuals' life. So thank you so much for sharing your journey with us, and we look forward to hearing more over the next 20, 30 minutes.
Thank you. All right. So, all right. So I think you're seeing my slides, which is great. Thank you so much for inviting me today to speak with all of you and as part of this Inventor Showcase series. If you had asked me 10 years ago if I would be standing here today talking about this, the answer to that question would have been no. I never pictured myself as an inventor or an entrepreneur or anything along those lines. From the beginning of my undergraduate education, I would say, I started to really find a strong interest and love of research in general. Answering questions, learning new things was very exciting to me, and I was grateful to have those opportunities as an undergraduate. And then once I came here to Ohio State University to the College of Optometry, I became involved in research in a laboratory. I thought that I was going to be, again, working in a very traditional lab, working with NIH funding and a horde of graduate students and doing that sort of thing. And what I found was, I think Dr. Jackson's words about all of us having different skills and things that we bring to the table and opportunities, things along those lines is really very true. And I didn't know this about myself. Maybe I wasn't self-aware when I was younger, but I'm a pretty good generator of ideas. I can solve problems. I can look at a series of things and see that there's something there, a question to be answered, and put pieces together and come up with a solution. And sometimes, often before other people can see it. So sometimes I have to work a little bit at getting other people to see what I'm seeing. I'm now working with teams where, I actually never have the goal of being a CEO of the company. I really just want to be I just really want to keep working in research and development. And that's it, because I realize I don't have those skills that a lot of CEOs have on certain things, but I'm an idea generator. And so I think if you're listening to this and you're not sure whether or not you might be an entrepreneur, you could be wrong about yourself. I certainly was. I didn't really think that I could generate. It just wasn't a career path I was introduced to and was sure of, which is, we'll talk about today about the REACH program and things along those lines that may help other people realize that they have abilities and skills that they didn't know. But also there's a huge number of different skill sets that are needed to take an innovation to market. And you might have one of those other skills that's needed, even if you're not the idea generating person. I work with a lot of great people, and if we didn't have everybody on our team, we wouldn't be successful. But one of the things I would say that for me has been something that I've been able to do is to think about things in a completely different and opposite way of what most people think about them. And so that's why I love this little sign that says push. If that doesn't work, pull. And one of the reasons for that is that's exactly what most of my inventions are. I've taken things that other people didn't see or weren't sure about, and I've turned them upside down and used a completely different mechanism in order to make my inventions work. And I think I just have the ability to turn things around in that way. And so if that's something that you've noticed about yourself, then thinking about that would be important. I was really grateful as part of the KL2 series to start to be exposed to the idea of commercialization and the idea of inventions and patents and all of that sort of thing, which is something I hadn't really ever been exposed to before I became a KL2 scholar. And I don't think it's any accident that that program, the first speaker in this series was one of my fellow KL2 scholars. We were in the same cohort. Dr. Doss and I were exposed to some of the same workshops and things, and I really came to see, as Dr. Jackson described, that this is a pathway to translational research. It's a way to get all of the work that you're doing into the hands of other people so that it makes a difference in somebody's life. So what I started with as a KL2 scholar, you'll see here on the upper left-hand side of the screen, that's a picture of the ciliary muscle, and sort of a funny theme to my research in general has been sort of bringing things to light that we don't see currently. So sometimes we get so focused on the knowledge that we have, the things that we have in our body of literature and that sort of thing, that we don't stop to think about what are the things that we can't see. What are the things that we're not looking at scientifically now? And the funny part about this muscle, the ciliary muscle that's inside the eye, as virtue of the funding I received from KL2 Scholar and other things, I have more images of this muscle than anybody else in the world. Well, that shouldn't be. It's the muscle that we use to read. And I found myself early in my career developing new ways to measure things so that I could do the research and answer the questions that I wanted to answer. And all of a sudden I discovered, as I was learning about this commercialization process, I'm really good at learning about new ways to measure things better than other people have. I know a number of entrepreneurs that set down a path to take something to market, and what they ultimately took to market was a test that they were using in their laboratory that revolutionized some new way of doing things in industry. It wasn't the final product that they were hoping to get to market, but something they developed in their lab, a new way of measuring things, a new way of developing things, turned out to be highly valuable and moved along, whatever field, drug development, other things that they were doing. And that was sort of, in some ways, what generated my career path as an entrepreneur as well. So even if you think I might not ever be an entrepreneur, You might have something that you're doing in your lab right now, a process that you've invented and developed, and you have no idea how much commercial value that has, just because you've never thought about it and you're never been in industry, and so you don't see those things. So that's, I think, something that if you're listening to this and you're really happy in your more traditional, non-commercial pathway of research, you can do both, actually, as Dr. Jackson mentioned, and you might find that there's some process in your lab that if you talk to TCO would be very valuable for commercialization and could be moved out of the university and help other people. So I don't know why I decided to take on so many commercialization tasks at once, but you'll see here also on the screen, I've been developing a new bifocal contact lens. It's in the upper right-hand corner of your screen, and everybody else was trying to take that contact lens and do it in a different way than what we have ultimately succeeded in doing, and I'll show you that. In the bottom part of the screen, you'll see down here, we've developed a software application where we can make multiple different measurements of the eye. Most ophthalmic equipment is the combination of a computer, a camera, and a light source. So that makes it very amenable to moving some of these things on an as-needed basis to a smart device. And that's what we've done here. We're looking at we're using a new way of measuring eye alignment. A lot of the healthcare professionals listening to this might have learned how to do a cover test at some point in your career. It's technically challenging. It's hard to remember all the steps. It's hard to do unless you have a huge amount of training in it. And my goal with that was to improve our ability by the test being walked through the procedures and telling any healthcare professional that's doing it how to do it as well as possible. And also, you need multiple hands. You need more than 2 hands to really do this test well. You have to hold the prisms, you have to hold the cover paddle, you have to sometimes hold a target for the patient, and then suddenly you're out of hands. The app itself calculates the amount of eye movement that happens during that digital cover test and will help, of course, eye care professionals, but school nurses and pediatricians and neurologists and other individuals who also might like to do this test, but maybe didn't get enough training in it and would like to feel more confident in their measurements. The autorefraction element is down there in the bottom right-hand corner. Again, it turns out that a smart device is pretty useful for making measurements of the eye, and there's a lot of people in this world that don't have access to glasses because of it. But we'll talk first about the bifocal contact lens. We're currently in clinical trials about that. And in terms of combining research and thinking about how you do these things together in an academic environment, I included this slide because I wanted you to understand that your traditional graduate students could be collecting great data for you that helps support your inventions and do other things. And even though they're doing things in a more traditional manner, one of my students was at COSI, talked with participants there at COSI who were wearing bifocal glasses, meaning that they had presbyopia, asked them about their preferences, what would they rather be doing. 70% of those adults who are wearing bifocal glasses said they would prefer to be wearing contact lenses, but there isn't a great option. Sometimes patients find the current method of how those bifocal or simultaneous vision contact lenses work to be something that isn't giving them optimal vision. So through the university and TCO, we've spun out a company called Lentechs that is developing the Apioc contact lens for presbyopia. And so when we talk about let me see if does it play. Yes, there we go. Fantastic. So the video plays, which is a win for our electronics today. So this is actually my eye, so that I didn't have to get permission for me to show their eye. You can see when we look down, this contact lens is suspended from the inside of the upper eyelid. There in the video, you can see when I look downwards, the contact lens stays with my upper eyelid, but recenters really quickly when you move back to straight ahead gaze. So this is going to allow us to have the distance, just like a pair of glasses, the distance portion in the, let me see if it'll play again. The distance portion in the middle of the contact lens and the bifocal in the bottom of the contact lens, just like we have in our glasses. And it stays very well centered, nicely in place in straight ahead gaze, but when patients look down, they're able to see through the bifocal like you would notice here. But then when I look ahead again, if you're looking at your dashboard, but then looking back out your windshield again, you want it to center quickly. We've been able to achieve that with this contact lens. Along those lines, another way that I could translate things in the world, I understood quite a bit about how the eye works, how light travels through the eye, and also the fact that there are millions of people in the world who have vision impairment simply because they don't have anybody to measure their glasses prescription. So in terms of understanding how these things work, understanding that there's a possibility that a smartphone which would be the ideal thing to use in many places. I also have a classmate who's from optometry school who works at the Euler School in Cincinnati, Ohio, working with almost all day long. She gives over between 20 to 30 eye exams during a school day to children in the inner city schools who are often homeless in Cincinnati, Ohio. It's not even, that far away, right? There are places here in Columbus, Ohio that are probably like this as well. She has to measure the eyes of a large number of children during a day. Having a device like this that could be inexpensive, portable, easy for somebody to use would be great in our country as well. There are many places where people just don't have access to care. And if healthcare professionals had access to this device, they could help us to get people the glasses that they need more quickly. So we have both the digital cover test that I talked to you about that measures eye alignment and how well the two eyes are aligned, which I believe we're missing critical components of that now because it's so difficult to measure. We're missing children and adults who have these vision problems that may be impairing their jobs because there aren't any jobs now really where you can not look up close and be able to read. So we want people to be as comfortable as possible and to find eye alignment problems that might be causing them fatigue or discomfort while they're trying to read. Also, the autorefraction, as I talked about, is something that we want to bring to market so that we can help people all over the world get access to glasses. It's certainly a big thing that should be happening in this day and age. People shouldn't be going without vision correction. So the resources that I use is the last thing I wanted to talk a little bit about. I've been really grateful to the partnerships I've had with TCO and the university. They've very much supported me in the work that I've done, and I consider them my partner. I've worked very hard. Whenever they've asked me to do something, I did it. Even if it meant flying home from a conference early to present at a startup snapshot that ended up, helping me find the business lead for our contact lens company. I thought there was a low probability of that working, but they said, no, you should come and present, and I did anyway, and I'm very grateful that I took their advice and did it. So definitely is something that you have to consider those individuals as partners. The Reach for Commercialization project that you're going to hear about a little bit more in a moment is something I also feel really grateful to have been a part of. It really, even though when I was going through the process and I thought, oh my gosh, they were talking about team building. I don't have a team, it's just me. There's nobody else helping me do this. I don't have any money, I'm having trouble attracting other people to do this. Just learning about that and having some sense of just the words, the vocabulary, all of the different moving parts that happen when you take something to market. I was never even in private practice as an optometrist. So I never knew anything about the business world at all, actually. I've worked in academia my whole career, and I'm happy to be here. But I needed to learn a little bit about other parts of the, of the industry that I just didn't know about. And the Reach for Commercialization process has been great for that. I also received Accelerator Awards. The university has worked really hard to put those awards in place. When I first started in this, they weren't available, and I had a hard time getting prototypes made, even though I wanted to, and I had these ideas that I thought were really good. Now that has been, alleviated. We have the little pots of money that I received from this Accelerator Award. I also have to give a shout out to my dean. I think if people look at my success story, one of the things they have to look at is that my administration of my college very much supported me, and not only supported me but encouraged me to do this and said, "Yep, go for it. You should try this. I know you well, I know you have good ideas, and I think you should go for this." And I couldn't have done that without the support of both these Accelerator Awards as well as my dean to do this. We also received funding. TVSF funding was received for actually both companies I've worked with. The state of Ohio is investing. This takes a long time. I was asked to talk a little bit about the timeline and moving things forward and what I would do differently and that sort of thing. One of the things I would do differently is not let the timeline frustrate me. I still have to work on that on a daily basis, but these things take a long time, and it won't happen overnight, and you have to just keep going and not let that frustrate you. And it may be something that you work on and you work on and you work on, and you finally hit a place where you break through and find the right people and the right funding and the right group of people to help you move this whole thing forward. Lastly, I would also say, in terms of things, you do have to have a lot of grit. When you start into this, nobody is going to say, especially if it's a really good idea. I think if you look at the stories of, watch over the next few weeks when we all have lot more time on our hands than we're used to having. Watch inventor stories. Walt Disney or other people who have successfully taken, things from their early stories about, how his first cartoon that was somewhat of a success wasn't actually Mickey Mouse. It was a different cartoon that he didn't read contracts carefully. There's some other details I don't all remember when I was at Disney World and saw his story. But I think if you read some of those stories, it will be helpful to you to realize that even the people who are the most successful had really early failures or really hard things that they had to overcome early in the process of that. So, look for documentaries on inventors and watch them over the next few weeks. And the other thing I would say too is, and I lament that this is virtually today. I think we're all going to have a hard time getting together in person, but the next time one of these inventor showcases that can be in person, come and be in person. I found that the biggest hangups we've had, and then when we've made mistakes in my commercialization process that I somewhat regret, it was because my collaborators were far away. They weren't here. They were great collaborators, but we should have had more face-to-face meetings. We should have spent the money and the time on that. Even if they were, one of our collaborators is in the UK. There's no substitute sometimes for explaining very difficult new concepts of being in person when you're all doing something no one's ever done before. Sometimes having everybody in the room together, even when you're a startup and you don't have much money, is really more important than you know. And we can't do that right now, any of us, but when we can, again, keep that in mind, that doing things virtually is not the best way to learn and to work together as a team. You should try to get together as often as possible. That's always when I found we made the biggest breakthroughs, was when we all got together in a room and were discussing a problem. So thank you very much for this opportunity to talk today. I did have a question in here about questions, a slide about questions, but I don't think we have a way to receive them.
Yes,
we
through
do?
the chat.
Oh, so there's a chat?
This chat link, it's been sent to all the registrants.
Okay, so there is a chat link if you want to ask me questions. I don't know how I see them. I'm sure somebody will help me. But...
So the way we'll do it is we will, at the end of the Q&A time,
okay.
I will get the questions and I'll read them out.
Oh, okay. So I guess, yes, feel free to, with the chat, go ahead and start asking questions you might think of. I'll turn it over to the next speaker, but Tanya tells me that we will be able to answer questions at the very end. So thank you.
Good morning, everybody. I'd like to thank the organizers for inviting us to present at the Inventor Showcase. My name is Mary Uhas. Sorry we can't be there. My colleague Carolyn Fisher-Foley is also unable to be there, so I'll be presenting this morning virtually. So let me tell you, first of all, Melissa did a really nice job of teeing up our program, Reach for Commercialization. And what I'd like to do is tell you about the program, start by giving you a little bit of background, and then telling you how the program works and giving you a little bit of our results. So Reach for Commercialization is part of a National Science Foundation grant under the Advanced Institutional Transformation Program. We received a 5-year, $3.9 million award at Ohio State in 2008. And Reach is developed among 3 other programs, and it emerged as our sister program. So just to move ahead then, our office, the Advanced Office, operates out of the Office of Research because this is not a diversity program. It's a program that helps to move forward people who might not necessarily be at the table when it comes to the innovation ecosphere. And if you see that last bullet, it basically stresses that Reach amplifies the impact of your research. So that by doing commercialization and innovation, this becomes a healthy part of career development for faculty and clinicians. Next slide, please. So, and then if you click one more time, this is the why. This is the why. So this came out of a report from the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office about a year ago. And what this shows is that the most recent data, if you look at that curve, the 2 curves that are circled, you can see that those 2 curves have been flat for honestly, about the last decade. The important one, the green curve, is the women inventor rate. These are the number of patents held by unique women innovators. So the purple curve tends to look a lot better because there are women who are serial innovators, just like Dr. Melissa Bailey, who we met. But when you look at the new women that are moving into the ecosystem, you see that that curve really needs to be bent upward. So if we look to the next slide, please. Here are some of our innovators. This is our current cohort. REACH is a cohort-based program. This is our current cohort of 22, I believe. If you click to the next one, this is last year's 2019 cohort, and then one more click will show you the cohort that we had in 2017. REACH was not an annual program that ran all year, so we didn't have the luxury of running in 2018, but now we're up to kind of full speed. So if we click to the next slide, this is REACH by the numbers. What we've shown is that across the on-campus cohorts, starting back in 2010, in the current and former cohorts, we've had 110 women participants, and they're from different colleges and subunits, and I'm going to show you a chart on that in a minute. But they're associated with 317 invention disclosures, 307 patent files, you can see, and the patents published are 44, and we credit our REACH youth with, as we call them, with 9 startups. And if you click to the next slide, you can see these are some of the startups. The people who are shown here, Gail Gordillo, Jessica Winter, Yale Zotova, and Betty Lisa Anderson, you can see the REACH cohort years are 10 and 11. So you see how long, as Melissa said, these things don't happen overnight. And one more click will show and there's Dr. Bailey, our other innovators who have started companies. So they're the role models to the people who are in our current cohort. All 4 of these women came from the 2015 cohort. Now the next slide shows where the participants are coming from. And you can see the lion's share come from the colleges of engineering and medicine. You can also see arts and sciences is well represented, and that's mostly in chemistry and the hard sciences. But in the last couple of years, we've had people from art, dance, design, and that's really added quite a bit of richness to the conversation. Moreover, we find that we have intra-cohort innovations and new partners that ignite during these cohorts. So you can see optometry. There's optometry where Dr. Bailey came from, and that's a thin sliver. But most of the 7 health sciences colleges have had participation. Next slide, please. So what is REACH? REACH is really an authentic, a network of authentic role models and near peers. The whole idea of having a near peer is really important because a lot of the innovators can't imagine themselves or envision themselves as innovators. I heard Dr. Bailey talk about that. Of actually saying the words, I am an inventor. We're welcoming, we're validating, and we're non-judgmental. What we find is that, like other things in our work life, women tend to not want to come forward and have something perfect. And what we tell them is, learn from your male counterparts. Just come forward with an idea and do a lot of listening. We have flexible on-ramps and off-ramps during the year. So if you miss a workshop, you don't have to start from the beginning. It's easy. We're always available. It's personalized. Tend to offer workshops that address the needs of small groups of innovators where they have things to do. It's not a boot camp. That was one thing that we learned is the fact that this is something that if you're not ready to write a business plan, that REACH isn't for you. We complement the boot camp model, but we are certainly far upstream for that. Having said that, we're also downstream. because those are the near peers that the early inventors need to hear from. And we operate year-round, and we'll talk a little bit about that. So if you can click to the next slide, I want to talk about, and I can't overstate how important Rev 1 has been to us. Both the TCO and Rev 1. Rev 1 is available to us as a resource by being available with their staff. Also, we hold all of our events at Rev 1. There's something about walking in the door at Rev 1 Labs, and all of a sudden you're breathing the air and you feel you're around the innovation ecosphere. That can't be overstated. They are also a monetary sponsor of research commercialization. So the next slide, I just wanted to quickly tell you about, we have 4 core workshops. And around the core workshop, we try and deliver content with experts and tried and true. One of the first workshop, and we just held our first workshop in January, is visioning the impact. Saying in your out loud voice, I'm an innovator, and this is what I can do if I'm an innovator. We bring in panels of women, faculty, like Melissa, who have been through this. The second and next slide is learning the landscape. This is really important. The landscape is about hearing from leaders, deans, department chairs, who have started their companies, who are entrepreneurial, who have spun out technologies, and most importantly, who are the wind behind the sails of their faculty. And they say, yes, this counts. This counts. The other thing we do in learning the landscape is partner our innovators with people at the tech transfer office, at the TCO, corporate engagement office, so that they can start to move forward to the next step, which is in the next slide, and that is the most important, building the team. What we find is that really smart people in their day job who are MD, PhD, DDS, OD, they think they have to do it all, and they think they even have to write a business plan and go find their own funding. And when they learn that really all you have to do is be the content provider and work with a team who can help you move this forward, it's kind of that aha moment that, okay, I can do it. The next slide shows our last core workshop, which, and these are held quarterly, by the way, is understanding the funding life cycle. And that's where they get to meet people from all different funding sources, starting with the corporate engagement office, where they learn about Accelerator Awards, but then also the SBIR, the angel investing, the VCs. We bring in VCs, especially women VCs. We've had people come in from Silicon Valley, and with people who are representing some of the big venture firms who can basically lay out a timeline that's relevant to them. And then I wanted to just move to my last slide, which shows we do constellation workshops. So these are clusters that do the deeper dive into the themes that are raised in those core workshops. So we'll do a core workshop, and then right after that, for the next couple of months, we'll do a constellation workshop. But these are really based on the surveying and the feedback that we get from the cohort. Where are you at this time in your arc of this innovation, and what do you need right now? So we offer things like the Rev 1 learning labs. There's a lot around research visibility, and creating your own brand kind of folds into that. This is really about the rest of them, optimizing professional conferences. All of this will point back to developing an effective LinkedIn profile, developing different slide decks for different audiences. And we've heard Melissa Bailey talk as a speaker at Reach, and the one thing that she talks about and her peers talk about is you cannot give a technical talk that you would give at one of your conferences to a group of potential funders, say VCs or angel investors. And you learn that by customer discovery. So I'm just gonna, the final slide shows our contact information, and I'll conclude there, and thank you very much.
Is Caroline?
Yeah, we're supposed to have Q&A.
Oh, okay. Caroline isn't saying anything.
No, Carolyn's not speaking.
Okay. Q&A.
Yeah. So can you do some filler for a few minutes?
Excuse me.
Get a conversation for a few minutes. Dr. Jackson will. No.
So I think we'd like to invite you to ask some questions of our colleagues, Dr. Bailey, Dr. Uhas. And maybe Bruce, do you have a question that you might want to bring up to Melissa?
Melissa, you want to come up? Yes.
So while Melissa's walking up, I'm actually going to ask her a question. So what do you think has been maybe the greatest challenge at moving things forward?
So that's a great question. I think probably two things. One, as Mary talked about, I don't know that I always believed I could do this. So sometimes I would say it was, sort of sadly, maybe my own self-doubt that, I could move this forward and, my own self-confidence and that sort of thing. But I also think when I started this really early on, the support system that inventors have at the university now wasn't available. And I hear people say at times, I know that there's a lot of work being done at TCO and within the university to change all of this. And in my attempts at doing this now for quite some time, I've noticed a huge shift in the university of having support systems available. I don't know how to, I fit soft contact lenses. I never made one, right? Like I don't make them from scratch here at the College of Optometry. When we fit them to patients, they're in a shelf somewhere. So I didn't know how to make one, and a couple of attempts that I tried to make to get a prototype made, I didn't have any money and to work to that initially. And so I just couldn't get a prototype made for a number of years, actually. So I think that was one of the biggest barriers, and we were really grateful first to get the Accelerator Award through TCO, which gave us a little bit of money. We didn't want to, my collaborator Joe Barr and I, who are working on that project, we didn't want to find an industry expert that we were initially like, I don't know, who are we going to ask? Once we found that person, turns out they had really great connections for prototyping laboratories that we didn't know existed. So, that was really, my collaborator, Dr. Barr, has a lot of experience in industry. He worked at B&L for 7 years, but he didn't know about these prototyping laboratories. So that was really great. So I think that, finding that initial funding, if you need a prototype made, is hard, but there's the Innovation Lab now here at Ohio State. There are Accelerator Awards, and there are a lot more people now that I think are thinking about this and know about those resources. So I think that's a big benefit now to everybody who's here.
Great.
While we have another second, do you have questions?
Yeah.
Okay.
So just as a reminder that you can ask questions through the WebEx chat feature. But you talked about how if we came back to you, I don't remember, it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago, and said, would you be standing in front of us today talking about that? And you're shaking your head vigorously, no. That you would have said absolutely not. And you've talked about some of the things that sort of got you to this point. But maybe I was wondering, was that sort of a gradual evolution? Was there a particular thing that sort of got you to say, this is something that I really want to do? And if so, what was that?
It was a bit of a gradual evolution in some ways, but I also think, honestly, if I hadn't been a KL2 scholar, with the CCTS, I wouldn't be here. That's where I was first exposed to the concept of commercialization and patents and inventions. And I think the more everybody who's listening to this, just by exposing yourself to this today, you will think differently the next time you're in your lab or you're in the clinic seeing patients or other places like that. And because of that, the more you just keep hearing, go to a workshop. I've done several around campus for the CCTS and other organizations here and there, TCO. I've talked a few times. By just continuing to expose yourself to the concept of, okay, wait a minute, I could do this. I truly believe there are definitely people on this campus who have some procedure they're doing in their clinical-based research or their laboratory-based research that they might not even realize has commercial potential. And once you start talking to TCO, you might discover, oh my gosh, there are people besides me who might want to use this. And so I think that it was a gradual thing that happened over time, but the one place I would say I started really thinking about it was the same place Dr. Doss started really thinking about it was with the CCTS. I really felt like as part of that whole program of learning about translational research and making your research impactful, that stuck with me. And I really realized over time that this was the best way I could make my research as impactful as possible. And like somebody said, I think really big now. And I didn't do that before I was part of the KL2 Scholar Program.
We have a question for Mary. Mary, can you give us some insights as to are there ways that that women inventors respond to calls in ways that are different from the general population, and what things do you do and does the university do to help facilitate that?
Scott, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, when you say calls, are you talking about basically raising your hand and submitting an innovation idea kind of thing?
I think so. I think so as it relates to, let's say, invention disclosures,
Right.
participation in that process, yeah.
Yeah. Well, thanks for that question. That's a great question. One of the things that we find is that the network, the power of the network is can't be overstated, honestly, because what they find out is that, oh yeah, she's kind of like me and she did that. And so sometimes you just need literally somebody to say to you, yeah, just give it a shot. What we find is that, especially as we say, the peers, but the near peers, we kind of make a joke that, when you're in first grade, you can't imagine graduating from high school and thinking about college. But at each step along the way, if you have an older sibling who's in second or third or fourth grade, it's relatable. So that really helps. Having the successful people like Melissa, who's wildly successful, also having people who have won awards. Innovator Awards, Accelerator Awards, anything like that. The worst thing that can happen is talking to any kind of a situation where it's awardees whose pictures are on the wall or whatever. If you look and nobody there looks like you, that can be very intimidating. And quite honestly, putting people from, successful women from Silicon Valley, who have started companies and now they're, in Fortune 50 companies or whatever, that is very, very intimidating and can work against people. So what we know is that the power of the network, but then also, and this is something that we did not know and we learned through surveying, when it comes to our REACH workshops, the most effective way for them to feel comfortable is when they are in a room with women. We have had really good speakers who know a lot and are very, very supportive of women who were men. And what we found was that there was a reticence and that they would wait until the men left the room to ask the question. Now, a lot of people say, well, when she goes out into the real world, it's full of men. And that's absolutely right. But you have to get those naive questions out of the way. And I used to feel really funny about saying we're a safe room, we're a safe zone. All of that stuff sounded a little bit anathema to me. But what we're learning is, and the way we know it is because they tell us.
Thank you, Mary.
I have one question. So one participant asked how they can get in touch with you, Mary. They want to connect with Reach. So can you share a little bit about how they can contact you?
Sure. Well, they can go to advanced.osu.edu, and all of our contact information is there. I think on the last slide, so I'm .1, JUHAS.1, and feel free to send me an email. They can learn more about Reach. If you go to advanced.osu.edu, our banner, our website banner, has our current Reach cohort, and that will take you directly to the Reach website, where they can click through and learn a bit more about it.
I was going to ask a question. Well, actually, I just got a question from someone who's listening, and I was wondering if either of you, Melissa or Mary, or anyone who's talked, Scott or Becky, could talk about a bit about how this fits into your work-life balance, juggling both the research side and the teaching and now the commercialization component.
Yeah, I would say I don't know that I've ever achieved work-life balance in my life. I think that most people, I don't know, I've never felt like I've achieved that. There have been times where I feel like I've worked too much. One of my mom's favorite sayings, though, is to be careful what you wish for. And I have lamented recently, it's like, I wish I had just a little bit more time at home to spend with my son and my husband, and now I have a lot of it. So, I guess we'll make up for lost time over the next few weeks. So life kind of goes that way, but I think my traditional, if you think of a traditional, what we consider traditional research pathway of filing NIH grants and writing publications and things like that, my CV is no longer filled up with those things anymore. I write publications. I haven't written a grant application in a number of years, but now there's my patent section of my CV or my dossier is quite full now. So you're filling up different sections. I think if you're in a place where someone is requiring you to still be submitting grant applications regularly and that sort of thing, it could be more difficult. I will also say, I think the announcements that went out about this, I have 2 startup companies. If you do that, you're definitely not going to have time for more traditional research. It's just not going to happen, but I don't mind, and neither does my college. I was recently put up for promotion to full professor and within my college based on this commercialization work. I haven't submitted any NIH grants in that time for them to really, to conclude anything from that. So I guess, I did give that part up. It doesn't mean I can't go back to it at some point in time if I wanted to. It's not like I've been sitting around doing nothing. So I think I think you do have to pick and choose. But I found, honestly, I think there's way more reception for my ideas in this realm than there was at the NIH. And so that's, in some ways I feel blessed, actually, not sort of, lamenting that I didn't have something else, couldn't write NIH grants right now. I think my ideas are very well received in this area, and this is just where I should be working. It may not be something for everybody here to do this, but I think for me, giving that up, and I haven't been in the clinic for a long time because I wanted to focus solely on research. So for me as well, that hasn't happened as much, but you also don't have to have 2 startups at the same time. You could just do 1 and keep some of those other things around.
So I might follow up. I think that for all of us, what drives us on a day-by-day basis is to have an impact. And that impact could be as a scientist in moving forward knowledge. It could be as an inventor And in many ways, it could be that if you yourself don't want to be the inventor, but you see that there's a development of new methodologies that have this, you can partner with others. And so I think when Melissa talked broadly about building a team and getting that team around you, not feeling like you're out there by yourself, that one of the important things is to feel comfortable in reaching out to Mary and reaching out to the CCTS or the Comprehensive Cancer Center or IDI or any number of the different institutes and say, you know, I have this great idea, I'm taking this forward, but I don't have that other set of skills. I'm looking for others to work together with me, and really bringing together those multiple different perspectives and expertise will allow you to succeed and to actually maintain that work-life balance, which I agree with you, is something that's out there, but I'm not sure any of us achieve.
So we have one more question, and the question is, curious, how might we start the conversation earlier in life? Do you recommend getting involved once established in your career? Like, how early could we start getting people to think about entrepreneurship and this pathway?
I think
Can I take that, please?
Mary? Did you want to
Yeah.
ask?
I just very quickly, the earlier the better, and that was a mistake that we made early on 10 years ago. We were quote unquote protecting the pre-tenure faculty or the early career faculty so they could launch their careers, and that was absolutely the wrong thing to do. And we've learned that now through postdocs and even graduate students, specialist students. If they have that appetite, let them go. Because the other thing that we're learning is that Jessica Winter, who also has a company, she's a chemical engineer. She actually hired somebody for her company when she was attending a professional conference, and it was a colleague's PhD student from another institution. So this can become a really powerful way to bring young people in. The one thing that I wanted to just quickly say about the last question, we hear all the time that people are just really busy, and that's why we make in our slides, we say 10 different ways that Reach is an accessible network that's available all the time, all year round, because we don't have work-life management. I don't even use the word balance because it's an imbalance. And so if we're there when they need us, that really helps to cement the relationship. They'll come and ask for help, even if it's off, quote unquote, off cycle.
Yes, did you want to follow up on that question as well?
I think two things. I think sometimes it can get frustrating if you look at the general outside of academia. There's a lot of emphasis on the 30 under 30 and oh my gosh, this person came up with their idea and they made it when they were 20. I think technology and commercialization should be open to anybody at any point in their career. Based on my conversations with people around campus, I don't think that every single college and department is on board with that in terms of the messages that they send to their faculty. I am very fortunate that my college is very supportive of what I'm doing. So I think we need to keep working on that here at Ohio State, and that may not be something that everybody can do at an early stage in their career, but I also don't think that you should be discouraged if you don't start your first company when you're in your 30s or something along those lines. I think that because I had a great wealth of expertise in the area that I'd spent so many years really studying the eye and how light traveled through the eye and different aspects of measuring the eye. And also, I had taught contact lenses, to the general concepts of fitting contact lenses to students for so many years. That was where my ideas came from because I had such depth in what I knew how to do as a professional and, as an academician, to a point that maybe other people, even in industry, didn't have that same knowledge. So I guess I just wouldn't worry about what age you are. I think certainly if you're earlier in your career and you have a great idea, go for it, no matter what. But if you're tenured, that tenure also gives you some protection to explore things that maybe people even in industry can't take the risk to explore. And you should use that for something other. And we talk about it being for academic freedom, but also you have some job protection. You could, as a senior faculty member, you could take a risk to really explore something, a big idea in commercialization that might fall flat, but you'd still have a job at the end, whereas someone in the industry didn't. So we're in a unique position in a university to really maybe make big leaps forward that are never going to happen anywhere else.
I had a question that's sort of that came in over the internet that's actually sort of a rubber hits the road kind of question, which is, could one of you talk a little bit about what types of conversations you need to have with department chairs and deans? I mean, you said that this actually has been, as you shifted your focus, that this has actually been really rewarded by the university, but presumably there was a little preparatory discussions and education that went on, and maybe talk about how to do that.
Yeah, well, one of the things that happened, was when I started participating in REACH and started seeing that other colleges and units were, I was kind of trailblazing this in my college, that other colleges and units were adding these activities as acceptable activities for promotion and tenure within their AP&T documents. I went to our dean, we were revising ours, and I said, hey, I found this language in several, they're all online, you can find them all on the OAA's webpage. You can look at the AP&T document for any unit there. I got the language from several others and said, hey, I think it would make sense. I don't feel like I'm being mistreated, but I think it would make sense if we added this to our AP&T document. And my colleagues and our dean and everybody agreed and added it in, and we moved forward with that. I think the part of the problem is that, I think in the general public, if you look at all startup companies, I think only 10% actually are successful, or some fairly low number, but we also don't get upset about the fact that 5 to 10% of grants are funded. We still write them. So seems like something that we should still be doing and rewarding people for doing. So I think that's how maybe you have those conversations. You say, hey, look, across campus, other people are doing this, and I would like to do that. I think that's the biggest problem, the conversation you have to have, is that if you are successful, I am getting a lot of my time paid for currently through the university, through grants, through the startup companies are buying out a lot of my time through the university. So there's creative ways of doing that so that you're still getting salary support, things along those lines, and then you can still work with the startup companies, and we could talk about that at another time. But I think if you're creative and an administrator who sees a faculty member that's especially a creative person and has a lot of ideas, this should be something we're supported. And I think, administrators should be rewarded for supporting faculty members who do things like this. And that's how we get those conversations going and things started. So hopefully we can do that. I think it's also, for me, it was a rewarding way after I got tenure to move my career forward in kind of a new way and re-energize my as a mid-career faculty member. There's a lot of discussions I know happening at the Office of Research with mid-career faculty. This is maybe a way for some of us to get re-energized in what we're doing and make that next leap towards becoming a full professor.
Thank you, Melissa. I wanted to mention, we were asked what are the ways to get started? Who do you reach out to talk to about your research? And so I wanted to first of all give a shout out to our friends and colleagues at the Nationwide Children's Center Commercialization Office, Dr. Matt McFarland and his team. And their website is nationwidechildrens.org/research/technology-commercialization. And all of their contact information and steps and procedures are on there. And then here at The Ohio State University, it's ceo.osu.edu. So there are people there that can, at both of our organizations, who can talk to you about your research. You go back to what Dr. Bailey was saying earlier. There was a time when perhaps she didn't recognize that she was sitting on potential intellectual property. And so if you're not even sure of what is the next step, we have people in our offices who would be very pleased to talk to you about that and help provide that initial guidance.
Great, thank you, everyone. So I'm Bruce Weinberg, and I'm one of the co-organizers of this event, this now monthly series. And I want to really thank everyone profusely for being with us this morning. I want to thank Scott Osborne and Becky Jackson for our introductions and for their words. Obviously, Melissa Bailey for sharing her experience, and Mary Uhas for discussing the REACH program, which is really exciting. I also want to thank Tanya Matthew and Carolyn Crisafulli, who along with me have co-organized this series. And I maybe say just a slight personal word that part of what we're doing here is research to understand, to provide evidence-backed methods of increasing commercialization. And this whole work really began with discussions with Mary and Carolyn, 2 or 3 years ago, and then with Becky and incorporated into the CCTS award. So this is figuring out how we can increase commercialization, especially among groups that are under participating at the moment, or where there's untapped potential, is of tremendous interest to us. I want to thank our sponsors, the CCTS, OSU's Corporate Engagement, Nationwide Children's Office of Technology Commercialization. I also really want to thank all of our attendees. I know that for the OSU attendees, there was an adjustment in terms of making this a virtual event, and I know for the non-OSU attendees that there were some technical issues that came up in terms of accessing the WebEx, and I really appreciate everyone bearing with us. I'll let you know that this event will be posted on the CCTS's website under the Inventor Showcase page. We already have our 2 prior events, January, Shub Das, and last month, February, Chris Brewer. They're there. This event will be there as well. But we really appreciate working with us in terms of getting things up for the technology. Next month, on the 13th, April 13th, we'll have Vish Subramaniam, who will be talking along with Cheryl Turnbull about funding sources, the TVSV, Accelerator Awards, and the CCTS awards. So that'll be a set of resources to provide to learn about funding. And we'll certainly work to both post that online and clear out the technology issues accessing the WebEx. But thank you, everyone.